My husband's parents were stung by an unidentified venomous queen hornet and rushed to the hospital. As soon as I heard the news, I hurried to the Entomology Research Institute to seek help from my husband, who was the director, hoping he could assist the doctors with the diagnosis. Instead, he called for security to block me at the entrance. "I don't handle work matters after hours," he said coldly. "Penny's mother is sick, and I need to go take care of her." I tried to show him the critical condition notice from the hospital, but he tore it up in one swift motion. "People die every day, so what if your dad and mom died?" After my in-laws passed away, I filed a lawsuit against Penny Madison, who had deliberately disturbed the beehive that led to the attack. My husband, who had disappeared for several days, suddenly showed up as an expert witness in court. He fabricated a false professional opinion to exonerate Penny. When I decided to leave the country, he lost his temper. "What do your parents' short lives have to do with me? Is it so hard to understand that after a long day at work, I just want to rest? And now you want to drag Penny into this mess? Just because your own family is broken, you want to ruin someone else's? How can you be so vicious? You deserve to lose your parents." Watching his brazen attempts to twist the truth, I suddenly realized something. He still didn't know that he had become an orphan. I rushed to the Entomology Research Institute to find my husband, hoping he could help save Dad and Mom. Instead, I was shut out. The security guard stopped me firmly. "Mr. Sanders doesn't handle matters after office hours. Please leave." I tried desperately to explain that it was a life and death situation. Only then did the guard relent and let me in. Inside, my husband, Vince Sanders, was lounging in his office, legs crossed, casually sipping hot tea. "Honey, come with me. Now, something's happened to Dad and Mom," I blurted, gasping for air. He raised his eyes to look at me, his voice cold and detached. "What could possibly have happened? Don't you know I don't deal with anything after work?" I struggled to catch my breath and pressed on. "They were stung by a queen hornet. It's critical," but Vince let out a mocking snort, his tone dripping with disdain. "If they were stung, take them to the hospital. What good can I do? And anyway, I'm busy later. I need to take care of Penny's parents. I don't have time for this nonsense." I had no energy to bicker over jealousy. Desperation took over as I shouted, "This is a life and death situation, and you're worried about your sweetheart's parents?" At my outburst, his expression darkened instantly. "Belle, if you have something to say it properly. Stop being so sarcastic and rude. And what's wrong with me helping Penny's family? Don't act like some shrew. I've had enough of it." Time was slipping away. I set aside my anger, pulled out the critical condition notice, and shoved it in his direction. Before I could say another word, Vince snatched the paper and tore it into pieces. "Are you done? What does it matter to me if Dad and Mom die? I've been working all day. Can't I rest? If their lives are short, who's to blame for that?" He glanced at his watch, grabbed his coat, and made to leave. "Don't get in my way. If you make me late for Penny's parents, you'll regret it." I reached out to stop him, but he shoved me aside harshly, his eyes filled with disgust, as though he were looking at garbage on the side of the road. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed with a call from the hospital. "Mrs. Sanders, your parents might not be able to hang in there much longer. Please come back immediately." I hung up and got into a cab, urging the driver to speed toward the hospital. My mind, however, was blank. That morning, my in-laws had gone to the mountains to pick some herbs, saying they were nutritious and would make a good soup. My mother-in-law, who always worried about my weak health, often went out of her way to prepare nutritious food for me. "Belle, just wait at home. The mountain air is too cold, you shouldn't come with us." But by noon, instead of their return, I received a phone call. "Hello, are you a relative? 2 elderly people were stung by a queen hornet. You'd better come quickly." When I arrived at the scene, my in-laws were already unconscious, their bodies covered in swollen, red welts. Though their features were barely recognizable, I could still make them out. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and a bone-deep chill spread through me. "What are you standing there for? Call an ambulance," someone shouted, snapping me back to reality. The incident had occurred halfway up the mountain, and it took the emergency team half an hour to arrive. When the doctor saw their condition, his face grew grave. "It would help if we knew exactly what kind of hornet stung them. Without targeted treatment, precious time will be lost, and it may be too late to save them." My heart clenched. My husband works at the Entomology Research Institute. He'll know for sure. I asked the doctors to take my in-laws to the hospital first while I rushed to find Vince. Never in my worst nightmares did I expect him to abandon his own parents for the sake of Penny's family. By the time I reached the hospital, the doctor shook his head regretfully. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sanders. We did everything we could. The venom spread to their central nervous systems too quickly. It was beyond saving. You should go in and say your goodbyes." On the hospital bed lay my in-laws, barely clinging to life. Their faces were swollen beyond recognition, their bodies puffed up, and their airways so compressed that they couldn't speak. "Vince, Vince." I leaned in to hear my mother-in-law's faint voice, holding her hand tightly. Before she could finish, her hand went limp. The next moment, the heart monitor let out a sharp, unrelenting beep. She was gone. Not long after, my father-in-law drew his final breath as well. In a single day, Vince had lost both his parents.